everyone. Welcome to our artist talk. Today we have the lovely Allison. Hi, Allison.
Hi.
So, Allison, tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been creating art for.
I went to art school, so I've been, making art and working in a creative field since graduating college.
Where did you go?
2001, I graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design, and I was a printmaking major. After graduating there, I became a jewelry designer, a costume jewelry designer. Providence, Rhode Island used to be like the capital of costume jewelry, so I worked there. And I went back to school because I thought I wanted to be a jewelry designer, so I went to FIT and got a design degree at FIT. And then I worked in the accessories and costume jewelry industry for a few years until about, I think 2008, when I went back to school again and got my master's in art education at the School of Visual Arts. And after that, I worked as an art educator, teaching art in New York City schools and New York State schools, mostly K through 5, some middle school portfolio prep classes here and there. And then recently I decided to leave teaching and focus on my own art.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so, recently, in the last year or two?
I think the last 2 years. So I live up in Mamaroneck, which is in Westchester, and I have 2 elementary aged children. So when COVID hit, when the pandemic hit, and my kids were at home, my family ended up making the decision that I would stay home. I was trying to transition into part-time teaching, and then it was like, all right, well, I'll just stay home and help my kids with their schooling when they were doing remote. And then, I started making my own art again, and I really got into it, and I decided, this is what I want to do now. I don't want to go back to teaching anymore. So it was official, I think, the spring of last spring. So spring 2021 was when it was official.
Okay.
I left teaching and started my own art career.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, congrats.
Thank you.
So now that you are a full-time artist, a studio or do you work from home?
Both. I have a studio in my house.
Okay.
And, I'm lucky enough that we have space in my basement that I have claimed as my own, and I'm slowly taking over the rest of the space. So.
Nice. And how would you describe your work?
Sure. So I would describe my work as mixed media, mostly collage-based abstract landscapes, but everything is very much rooted in observation. So many of my landscapes, especially like the gold and black series that I've been working on, are inspired by the contours of the Hudson Valley and the Catskill Mountains.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that. I can also see from these pieces too, where having a jewelry background could maybe have come in.
I think so. I definitely once I started
with the glass and
the glass and the mirrors and the chains. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you how do you get inspired, and do you have a process?
So like I said, I'm really inspired by observation. So just looking closely and noticing beauty in unexpected spots. So one of my favorite things is just walking and looking. And it could be walking, down the street here in Brooklyn, it could be anywhere. Just walking and looking and taking my time to notice things. That's my biggest source of inspiration. So how I usually work is I spend a lot of time, out walking, observing, noticing, documenting with photographs, and sometimes I'll do rubbings of things, or if I'm walking in the woods, quite often my pockets are filled with stuff by the time I get home. And then I use all of those documents, like the photographs, the rubbing, the things I've collected as inspiration for the larger compositions.
Okay, cool. And what is your process of creating new work?
Sure. So, I feel like my process is, once I get to it, it's fairly intuitive. So, I'll decide on a color palette, like the black and golds. I've really been into for a while. I just love the way they work together. And I also like limited color palettes because it helps you, the observer, focus in on things like texture and differences in edges. So I'll choose my color palette, and then I'll just start, like I'll have my pictures and things around me, and I'll just start creating. Generally, I'll start with tearing up some paper. Working with collage is I like the sensory experience of it. I really love paper. So I'll tear paper, I'll cut paper, and I'll start arranging pieces on my desk or wherever it is I'm working. I tend to work on, when it's the smaller pieces, I'll work on several at a time, and like move things around until it feels right. And then I start putting it together, and then the last step is putting it on the paper. With the exception of these, the glass is relatively new.
Okay.
So the ways this works is, I'll start with a piece of white paper, and sometimes I put down, like in this top one, that gray piece on the bottom is underneath the glass.
Oh.
And then I'll crack the glass, and then I collage on top of the glass. So I'm playing with the layers also.
Cool, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love the glass. It
Mm-hmm.
creates like a new element to it that's really interesting, and with like the viewer, you're trying to see like how did you create it, what's
Mm-hmm.
going on, like your brain is working with it, and you see like the nature aspect of it, but then there's like a hard element to it.
Mm-hmm. And that's slightly dangerous.
Yeah.
When I started doing it and I was showing it to other artists and getting feedback, a lot of people were like, "Oh my gosh, are you wearing gloves when you do this?" Like, yes. I'm being very careful.
I'm sure your kids are not around.
No, they're not. They do not come into my studio when I've got the glass happening. So yeah, I'm really loving the glass and playing with the layers of transparency, which is another reason tissue paper comes up in my work a lot, because I like the layers and the transparency.
And that you can layer lots of
Mm-hmm.
it. So are you starting to use the same technique often? Is this becoming the Alison Bololin? Is that, did I say it right?
Bololin, yeah.
Bololin, sorry.
It's a tongue twister. It's
The
okay.
Bololin method?
Yeah.
Or are you still experimenting to find yourself as an artist?
That's a great question. What is really me, and I have found my voice as an artist, is with these landscapes and the process of starting from observation and working into a more intuitive space as I'm working. But I also do other stuff. I do figurative work. And I'll just, I also do a lot of playing, and I have some more colorful work that I'm working on. So I wouldn't say this is exactly what I'm doing and this is what I will always be doing, because I like to leave room to grow and to change.
Right.
I'm already, one thing I am doing with these and the mirror is starting to work bigger, so much larger scale, which I'm taking things that I learned while I was making these, but also I have to learn a lot more. I have to learn a little bit about, I think glasswork and mosaic in order to get on a larger scale, so the pieces aren't falling apart, sort of thing. But I don't know what my work's going to look like 2 or 3 years from now, or even a year from now. I think I don't want to say this is the kind of art I do. I think my art will always be rooted in observation and will always lean towards abstraction, but I don't know if it's always going to look like this.
Right.
Yeah.
But you started out as in the first year or so with painting, right? Did you do some kind of, is that right?
Yeah, I was doing some painting. Yeah.
But I feel because I want to say it was on your website, and it was kind of similar to this, but more as a painting. Is that right?
I'm trying to think. I know when I first started out focusing on my own stuff, I was doing painting. And I do have a few mixed media pieces on canvas, larger ones that I was experimenting with, but there's also collage in those. So they're not just painting, but it's mixed media where I think I started with collage and then did some paint and went back to collage on top of it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think that's one thing that's so beautiful about art is there's always room to grow, always room to try new things, to experiment, to see what works for you and what doesn't, and just to keep diving into it.
Yeah, definitely.
And that is cool that you have a jewelry background, that you also have some teaching experience, because there's that when you have to teach it, you have to constantly train other people.
Yes.
So you're working yourself.
Oh, definitely. The past few years of teaching, I was really focused on teaching students like how to be an artist instead of like, it was a choice-based art education, which is like a whole other conversation. But instead of saying like, this is the project we're making, step 1, step 2, step 3, and then we all have artwork that looks similar, I was teaching and guiding students into like, well, how do artists come up with their own ideas? Like, you know, so we're working on them being artists, and it was through like teaching that way that I think I also relearned how to be an artist myself, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have you experienced any gender playing a role in the art world, or have you bumped against any stereotypes?
So,
or not really?
Well, I mean, I think nothing like personal. Like there was never any like, you know, personal one-to-one interactions, but like all the art teachers I know are women, and all of the, you know, most of the designers that I knew in the costume industry world were women, and which is not a bad thing. It was great, but there is like a definitely like this is, you know, the area of the industry where mostly women are doing work, right? And then like in education, lower grades, like it's a lot of women who are teaching, and I was like, we need more men. Like, we need more men in the younger grades, and then when you get older, especially when you get to college in fine arts and in a lot of other areas, like that's where you find the men academics, right? So like there is a weird divide. It's changing, certainly. There's always room for improvement. And then, you know, now that I'm a mother and an artist, it's a challenging space to be an artist. Just in terms of things like it's difficult to participate in the art world because I've got 2 kids at home. So,
right.
You know, I can't go out every Thursday night to go to all the openings. Someone gets sick, and then there goes the plans for the night. So, and then also things like residencies and grant programs. It almost feels like the parent world is not included in those things. It is getting better, and like there are a few programs and spaces that are really becoming more inclusive, not only of parents but, you know, everybody, like people of color. It's really, I feel like it's starting to change, and it's not so much like the artist is like this, you know,
black and white
man. So there's room for improvement.
And you're going to an artist residency.
I am.
Can you speak a little bit about that? Is that something that is opening up? Like, are your kids coming, or is that something you are taking for yourself?
I'm taking this for myself.
Okay.
My kids could come. So it's at the Stay Home Gallery in Paris, Tennessee, and it's the women who run it also run the Artist Mother Network, which is a really wonderful, supportive network for people who identify as, you know, artist mothers.
Cool.
So I'll be there for a week. It's a family-friendly residency. Like, I could have my family come with me if I wanted to, and I did invite them. But it coincides with my kids' winter vacation, so my husband is going to take the kids to visit his family in Savannah, and I'll go to the residency by myself, which is like amazing. I can't remember the last time I had a significant chunk of time to myself to just make art.
Then for my last question, what is the last thing you want to leave people about you and your art?
So I want people to notice. I want my art to stop people in their tracks and have them take a moment and look and notice and get in close and observe things. And that works with my art on both scales, larger and smaller. There's enough there. Someone told me it was like a feast for your eyes, that the more you look, the more you see. And what you notice the first time you see it is going to be different from what you notice the second time you see it. and put it before.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Allison.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone who took the time to view this.
Yes, thank you very much.